Hello friends, my name is Abhishek and you are watching Common Minds. In today's video, we are going to discuss how to create a high impact presentation. Well, it's not a very uncommon scenario for most of us working in corporates where your client, your supervisor, the CFO suddenly walks up to you and then asks you to create a presentation. If you're a seasoned player, it's not a big deal for you. But if you are new to this world, this can get quite challenging. So in today's video, let's understand what are the elements that goes into a presentation to make it a perfect deal. So is it a big deal? The answer may be yes or maybe no, depending on what level of proficiency you are right now. But this is for sure that getting the perfect presentation out of the kitty needs a lot of elements to go inside it and a lot of balancing has to happen. Making presentation is an art, it's a skill, but nobody's born with it. With time, you can acquire the skill with continuous practice. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. Making a presentation can be divided into two parts. One is the structure, the content, the structure of the content, and the second one is the delivery of the content, the body language part, which is the software skill. In today's video, we will discuss about the structure of the content. Though we will not go deep into how to write a content, but we will touch upon some of the basic fundamentals that we should know, some of the do's and don'ts that we should follow once we start writing the structure or designing the structure of our first content. PowerPoint still remains the most common mode of creating a presentation. It's because of the ease it has, the acceptance it has. So assuming that our presentation is going to be a PowerPoint presentation, let's go ahead and see what all goes into creating a good content. So let's get started with the content structure part. Well, by the time you come to know that you are supposed to make a presentation, you start running here and there like a headless chicken. There are a lot of questions that you need to answer right now. What do I present? When do I present? How do I present? How much time do I need to present? And there are a lot of questions that starts haunting your mind. Let's try to narrow this down and start approaching our content one by one. The first and the most important aspect, even before you start writing your content, is the identification of goal. You should be very clear in your mind that what is the message you want to deliver to your audience by the time your presentation comes to an end. Once you are clear with your goal, you need to design your story or the content around the same. As it was called by Harvey Diamond, if you don't know what you want to achieve in your presentation, the audience will never will. And even the audience might start running here and there like headless chickens. The next important part is to understand who is the audience in front of whom we are going to present the content. Depending on the audience, you might need to alter the approach or the way you want to design your structure. So, what should your presentation cover? Your presentation should be short enough to cover the most important parts of your story. Yet, it should reveal all the important details that you want to share with your audience. And last but not the least, it should keep your audience engaged throughout your conversation. So now we know that how elaborate our presentation should be. Let's start attempting our first content. There is a famous rule which was given by a famous author called Guy Kawasaki. It's called the 10-20-30 rule of an effective presentation. And what does it speak about? It says that your presentation should not be more than 10 slides. It should not surpass more than 20 minutes, and it should not have fonts which are less than 30 points. So if you want to make an effective presentation, you should always follow this rule. Nowadays, if you look at the attention span, the research says that the average span of a common audience has reduced up to 3 seconds. So we have such a less time to create the first impact. So we cannot go and build stories which are too long. We need to be short, crisp, and to the point, and yet able to take the attention of the audience. So if we can do this, we can achieve a perfect presentation very easily. So now you know how big can be your presentation. Let's jump into the content part. So we will not again go and write any content over here, but let's understand before we start writing the content, what should be our approach. First of all, identify the time which has been allotted to you for the presentation. Do not exceed it. Decide the approach. Which approach do you want while writing the content? The most two common approaches are the top-down approach and the bottoms up approach. In the top-down approach, which is the most common one, you will tell about the topic or the agenda, why we are meeting, and then you will further in your subsequent slides break down into further details and explain why this topic was so important. In the bottoms up part, you start with the problem statement. You start with the details first, and then you come to the problem statement that why this topic was so important to be discussed. It depends whatever approach you take, but then before you start designing your content, you need to be very clear on this. Last but not the least, always keep some time for the Q&A session. Do not wrap up or do not take up the entire time for your presentation. Taking feedback from the audience is a very key element for an effective presentation. It has two benefits. First of all, you come to understand if the audience was attentive and they're asking you the right questions or not. The second thing is you get the feedback on spot and you know what next needs to be done to achieve your goal. Even before you start writing your content, there are some important do's and don'ts that you should follow. If you have this in your content, your presentation might not go well. So let's understand what are some of those key do's and don'ts that you should be aware when you start writing your content. The first one is never use too much of animations or sounds. It distracts the audience from the message. For example, in this presentation, you see that there are already two pictures on your screen. Now, this picture out of nowhere makes a sound and goes somewhere. Then A suddenly appears after B, and then C comes rotating somewhere. There is no sync, there is no link, and people are distracted and they are like, what do you want to say? If you are not good in animations, don't use it. Even if you are an expert, use for minimal effects. Used to convey the story rather than just to show that you know how to do animations, because it simply takes away the entire attention of the audience. The font size should not be too small. Many times it happens that we give presentations in rooms which are quite large. There is a good distance between the projector and the audience, and it's not visible. If you remember the 10-20-30 rule, that also says that to create a good impact, a visible impact in the minds of the audience, your font should not be less than 30 minutes. If you look at this slide is so overloaded. There are so much of content that people will not understand that where they should focus upon, or what is the key message coming out of the slide. So if you have too many content that you want to present, break the data into different slides, but do not overload it. Otherwise, the entire gist of the slide that you want to pass on to the audience gets lost. A very common scenario in our presentations. By the time you finish a story, your audience is almost half dead. This happens because we use long sentences, long stories. Never do that. Use pointers or bullets. A very common mistake that all of us do when we start with this particular skill. We think pasting pictures make our slides very fancy, which is not. It can go the wrong way as well. In this slide, if you look at, there is a cricketer, but that cricketer is definitely not this particular cricketer that is being talked about. So there is no match of this sports star versus this insect. Similarly, if you look at this picture, it has got no back, it has got a gray background compared to a white slide, and it doesn't go well. The picture a bad ball wicket doesn't make any sense. So idea is not to paste as many good pictures as you get on the website. Ensure that you use pictures which are relevant, which complements the story that you want to tell, and don't use too much of it, else it will take away the entire message. The audience will get distracted. Charts, a very effective tool when you want to tell your story or when you are designing a content. Chart is one part of the content which always deals with data. If you have data, the audience relates to it even much better. So always try to use some data driven charts and graphs to catch the attention of the audience. Color combinations. This slide looks so pathetic. If you look at the color combinations, there's not a single color which I have left and not used over here. It almost looks like a rainbow. So people are distracted. They don't know the message coming out of the slide. So always ensure that you use color combinations which are in sync, or each of your companies has by policy design has got some pre-designed templates. Please ensure to use them. Last but not the least, spell checks. When you circulate your presentation to somebody, if there are spelling mistakes or spelling errors, the recipient will not feel good about it. He or she will think that the sender is not too serious about the content. So it's a good check to have even before you send your presentation to somebody. You can always go to the review option of the PowerPoint, and then you can click on the spell check. With that, we come to the end of this session. I hope the tips I shared with you were beneficial and will help you when you design your content next time. In the next video, we will discuss about the delivery of the content and the body language. Till then, have a great time. See you soon.